One of the stranger releases for Berlin German for Flames of War is the Panzer II. Having a Panzer II in plastic is not that weird, but having it released for a late war era covering the very last days of the German Reich was unexpected. Join me for a look inside the box at this tiny little plastic kit. This is GBX183, the Panzer II tank platoon box for Flames of War. I know a lot of people who've been eagerly anticipating this early war tank in plastic, but no one thought it would turn up in a late war release. Why is it in Berlin German? Because late model Panzer IIs were still being used for driver training in tank schools. One of the formations in the book is the Tank Training Company, which were ad hoc formations formed from training centre staff and equipment. These were a mixed bag, from hulking Tiger IIs through to diminutive Panzer IIs. Design work on the Panzer II started in 1934, with later development driven by experience from the Spanish Civil War. Both Panzer I and II were envisaged as interim designs. These were expected to give crews training in armoured operations, not be actual combat vehicles. However, delays in Panzer III and IV development meant that the Panzer II was the German Army's most numerous tank at the outbreak of World War II. German blitzkrieg in Poland and France ran on the tracks of the Panzer II, supplemented by captured Czech tanks. Panzer II was tiny. Armed with a 2cm KWK-30 cannon, it had a crew of 3, driver, commander, and radio operator. The commander fired the guns, as well as commanding the tank. Early models had 14mm of armour protection, increased to up to 35mm in places on the Ausf F. After seeing widespread service in Europe and North Africa, Panzer II was removed from frontline service by the end of 1942, relegated to training and second-line duties. However, the chassis was used as the basis for a number of other vehicles, like the Vesper SP artillery gun and the Marder II tank hunter. Production ceased in January 1944. If we look at the back of the box, there's an image of a completed kit and an exploded assembly diagram. The only optional parts shown are the jerry can stowage, the turret stowage bin, and the open or closed cupola. There are actually more options available on the sprue, but more on that later. The box contains parts to build 3 Panzer II tanks. There's also a sprue of hard plastic tank commander figures supplied. What you don't get are any decals or unit cards. These are separate purchase items. Let's look at the plastic. The Panzer II comes on a single sprue broken into 2 frames, moulded in mustard yellow plastic. The parts look great. They have the same sharply moulded, crisp look we expect from Battlefront plastics. The thing that should catch your eye is the 2 hulls. Remember I said there were more options than the assembly diagram covered? The second hull and other hatch options let you build an earlier version of the tank. The Panzer II-C, I think. Here's the early hull close up. The most obvious visual cue is the angled front hull plate near the driver's vision port. That's characteristic of the early marks of this tank. This is the hull you'll most likely want for early war vehicles produced up to mid-1940. From early 1941 onwards, production switched to the Panzer II-F. That's this hull. You can see the front plate is now a single flat piece of armour plate. There are also additional stowage boxes, and the tool placement has been reorganised. There's plenty of engine grille and tread plate checkering detail here. It looks great. The rest of the parts here are for the turret. The turret upper and lower pieces fit together, with plenty of mating surface overlap for good glue joins. There's even lift ring and vision slit detail here. Nice work for such a small piece. The 2cm gun, coaxial MG34 and the mantlet are a single piece. This should make assembly very straightforward and avoid the possibility of any barrel wonk. The MG34 has some nice barrel shroud perforation detail. The piece nearby is the turret stowage bin. I'm not sure how commonly this was fitted. I couldn't find many research images with it attached, but it's there if you want to use it. There's open and closed versions of the hatches. The cupola version is for late production Cs and all the F model tanks. Earlier Cs would use the square flush-fitting hatch. You get open and closed versions of this one as well. Moving to the other frame, the tracks are single-piece parts. This has the characteristic 5 road wheel suspension system used by the A through C and the F model. The D and E models used a different torsion bar 4 road wheel system, so you can't build those here. Track detail is pretty much non-existent. Not surprising in such a tiny kit, but it doesn't look much like the more skeletonized real thing. The track pieces are keyed, so you'd have to work hard to put them on incorrectly. I'm not saying they're idiot-proof, but idiots would have to bring their A-game to get this wrong. The remaining parts are the lower hull, hull rear, plus some jerry cans and spare tracks. There's some massive ejector pin marks under the hull, as well as a big square void. Not sure what's going on with that. So, those are the parts for the plastic Panzer II kit for Flames of War. It looks like a great little kit that will go together fine. Moulding and engineering are up to Battlefront's usual excellent standard. Being able to make the early version Panzer II-C as well as the later F model is a nice touch. The first step towards early war in plastic. But I think early war players shouldn't hold their breath. This was a kit designed for Berlin. It just wouldn't make economic sense to do it without including the options for the earlier variant too. This is usually where I'd talk about how Panzer II would do on the table, but I'm going to change things up a bit. You can all see the stats here from the Berlin German book. The weapons and armour are unchanged from Africa and Iron Cross Panzer II-Fs. The 2cm gun has AT5, 5+ firepower and a range of 20 inches. Armour is 3 on the front and 1 side, rear and top. The big difference is the quality of the crew. This Berlin card reflects that these Panzer IIs are manned by students from the tank training schools. They're still confident with 4+ motivation, the same as earlier crews, but they don't have the 3+ last stand for morale tests. And the inexperienced Berlin crews are aggressive rather than careful, which means they'll take risks the more seasoned troops wouldn't. This means they're hit on 3+. But the real difference is the skill rating. They're rated as green rather than veteran. This lack of training drops them from 3+ to a 5+. They can drive the tank and probably shoot the gun, but don't expect these guys to be able to perform complex maneuvers like blitz or shoot and scoot. So they still get the Stormtrooper special rule, but they're much less likely to be able to pull it off. On the table, you might need to keep these troops close to the unit leader to take advantage of any bonuses he might grant them. Plus, the Panzer II's 2cm gun isn't going to be a match for late war tanks. It will, however, be useful against lighter vehicles, troops, and gun teams. Plus, the machine gun is still effective too. So how do you field them in Berlin? Panzer IIs are part of the new Tank Training Company formation. They're not part of the compulsory platoons. They're optional. Over here with the Panzer IIIs. You get 3 of them for 2 points. There's only 1 slot to take them in the company, so 3 is all you can get. But the Tank Training Company is the perfect list if you want a little bit of everything on the table. So that's the Panzer II tank platoon box for Flames of War. The kit is tiny, but it's great. It builds up well into a nice miniature, and makes a nice contrast to the recent late war heavy kits like Tiger II and Jag Tiger. Including the option for the early war Panzer II makes sense, but I'm sure it will stir renewed calls for more early war plastic. The Tank Training Company list is a great way to chuck spare kits from the entire war into one melting pot of a formation, but the day of the Panzer II is long past by this stage. Use them against soft targets and keep them away from any real tanks. So I hope you enjoyed this look inside the Panzer II Tank Platoon box. Are you going to use the Tank Training Company? If you do, are Panzer IIs going to be a part of that list? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.